Nishmas Yaakov and Yirmiyahu Emmanuel. Just as a side note, I heard that somebody brought up a controversy with his name. When he got Elias in Anshe Chesed in Atlanta, where I was his Rav many times, we only called him Rabbi Yaakov and Yirmiyahu Emmanuel. And if he had a different name, it's a Shem Nishkach. So any davening I'm learning in mitzvahs that I've done should be done. Lili Nishmas Yaakov ben Yirmiyahu Emmanuel. Masechtas Tamid, it talks about the Korban Tamid, and the end of the Masechta talks about the shear that the Levium used to say, very familiar to us. The shear that the Levium used to say when they used to bring up the Korban Tamid, and the Mishnah ends off by saying, on all the different days, the Ashir Shalim HaYamrim, the Mikdash, and the Mishnah goes through the different days, and the last day it says, B'Shabbos, on Shabbos used to say, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos is the Shir for Shabbos. Mizmor Shir L'Asad Lavai. Mizmor Shir L'Asad Lavai for the song of praise for the future. The Yom Shekula Shabbos Menucha L'Chayil Amim, for the day that is considered all Shabbos, all our lives long, and Menucha and rest and peace, L'Chayil Amim, for all eternity. Hadron Alecha. B'zman shekayin gadol, v'sulkol Masechtas Tamid, Hadron Alach b'zman shekayin gadol, v'sulkol Masechtas Tamid, Hadron Alach b'zman shekayin gadol, v'sulkol Masechtas Tamid, Hadron Alach Masechtas Tamid, Hadron Alach, Hadron Alach, Dayton Alach Masechtas Tamid, Dayton Alach, Mr. Sheminach Masechtas Tamid, Mr. Sheminan, Leba'am Adem, Leba'am Adasid, Yiratzam Lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu V'Levaseinu, Shetei Tarazcha, Amonasenu B'Lam Hazev. Hey, Manolel, Bachanina, Papa, Papa, Nachum, Papa, Achoy, Papa, Abamori, Papa, Rafim, Papa, Rachel, Papa, Sursa, Papa, Adu, Papa, Doru, Papa, Aravna, the Nile, was the race of some of them to get some of Israel. Neocolano, and after was saying, Sayam of Israel. Only they should not from this or Sacha, my best Hakamani, Mr. Sacha, Kilam Hili, Hili be some of the Kekal, Manla, Vashlam, Lashkas, Budacha, Kivam, Kisani, Bruchata, Dainai, Amdani, Hukach, Amen, Salavad. Vaydim nachlu v'nacha Adonai Eloheinu v'levaseinu. Shesam t'chalkenu v'yashvei v'samanu shesam t'chalkenu v'yashvei kavanis. Shana mashkim v'hem mashkim, anu mashkim v'devei Torah, v'hem mashkim v'dvarim b'telem. Anu amenu v'hem amenu. Anu amenu v'kav musacha, v'hem amenu v'hem kav musacha. Anu ratzim v'hem ratzim, anu ratzim v'chayel v'abah, v'hem ratzim v'gay shachas. Shenemar v'atal v'hem t'vidim v'gay shachas. Anu shedamu v'mirim v'lechtu yimei v'ani eftach bach. Yiratzim v'nacha Adonai Eloheinu k'shem, shazatani l'zayim Masechtas Tamid came tazmenu l'haskil. Masechtas is thrown lacherim, l'sayim on lumad, l'lamed, lishma, l'lasas, l'tayim is cold, and race of mutter, l'sachel, b'ahava, l'schus, kol t'nayim, v'mrayim, l'simit, l'cham, yamali, l'zari, shalai, tamu, shatayim, mipi, v'izari, v'zerazari, ad, l'elem, l'skayim, b'ivas, l'echata, l'tamis, l'isach, b'shach, l'takish, malacha, l'ketzoysi, hisis, l'ketzoysa, hisis, l'kacha, ki vi, yirbi, yamecha, v'sifa, l'cham, shnoiz chayim, oyrach, yamim, b'yamina, b'smei, l'oish, l'kaven, Adonai, oiz, l'may, yitin, Adonai, v'reich, asavai, v'asholloim. Okay. We do not have a minute. We cannot say Kaddish. But meanwhile, I think what we should do is wash for Malka, and then we'll start to share. Okay? So let's then we wash, cover the seam, Mazel Tov, we finish Baruch Hashem, Masechta. Start. I'm going to give a shear on the mitzvah of the Haftarah Racha Kamocha, which I think is highly appropriate. The mitzvah of Haftarah Racha comes from the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim in Sefer Vayikra in Perek Yud Tes, pasuk Yud Ches, and the full pasuk reads: "Leisikum uleisita es b'nei amecha." Don't take revenge and don't hold a grudge against your fellow Jew. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, literally translated, it means you should love your friend as yourself, and it says Ani Hashem. Now, all the Monim mitzvah, all the people that count mitzvahs that I've seen count this as one of the mitzvahs. The Saadia Gaon, the Rambam, the Ramban, the Chinuch, the Smag, the Smak, and the Sefer Yereim all count this as one of the Taryag mitzvahs. It's a very crucial mitzvah in the Torah because the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Akiva says, there's a member in Sifra, Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh Klal Gadol B'Torah. This is Klal Gadol B'Torah. Rashi and Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph. Other Mefarshim explain. The Chinuch also says that Roiv mitzvahs are totally in the Haftarah Racha Kamocha, even though it says Zeh Klal Gadol B'Torah, it doesn't mean that all the mitzvahs are totally in it. But Roiv mitzvahs, as Rashi and the Chinuch point out from the Sifra, from Chazal, Mem's Chazal, that Loisik Noivu, not to steal, not to encroach on somebody else's wife, not to encroach on somebody else's harmony or on his field or to take advantage of him in any way. All these mitzvahs, which we do on a steady basis, are all negeya to the mitzvah of the Ahavta L'Reacha Kamaycha. Even though in the Sifra, the Hemshech of the Sifra, it says, Ben Azai disagrees with the Rabbi Akiva, and he says that Zeh Sefer told us Adam, that is the Klal Gadol B'Torah. It says in the beginning of Bereshis, this is Sefer told us Adam. This is the following verses are the generations of the world. That is the Klal Gadol B'Torah. The Mefarshim, the Rash, Rabbi Shimon Shemishans, and the Ravid say, and the Smak says this also in Siman A, that Ben Azai doesn't mean to disagree with Rabbi Akiva, and Azai merely means to say that according to Rabbi Akiva, what happens if a person is in a very depressed situation? Let's say he lost an arm or a leg. He shouldn't care about somebody else's loss of a limb. That's the understanding of Hataracha Gamocha, says Ben Azai, no. And you have to include the pasuk Zeh Sefer told us Adam, which means that there's an elementary menschlichkeit to a person treating another person with dignity and with respect. I'm going to explain shortly. The Gemara in Daf Lamed Aleph and Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph and Aleph, says one of the most often repeated stories. The Gemara says this. Maisa, Anachi Yechad Shabbat Nei Shammai, Anachi came into Shammai. Amalek Yareni, Amanashet Lamadeni, called Darkula, Kashini Omed, Al Regalachas, Bima Gayami, as I am teaching the entire Torah as I'm standing on one foot. So Beishamai was the Chafel B'Masa Binyan, and Beishamai pushed him off with a ruler that he had in his hand. Bolif Ne Hillel. He came to Hillel Gira, he was Megayer him, and Amalo he said, De'alecha Sani, what you dislike, L'chaverecha lo sa'av, don't do to your friend. Zui this is the entire Torah. Pirusha, all the rest of it is simply explanation. Zil Gemar, go ahead and learn. So many of the Mefarshim learn that it's much like that in Rashi, but many of the Mefarshim understand that this is a pirush on the pasuk of the Ahavta L'Reacha Kamaycha. So the Ramban says this, and the Chinuch says this, and the Smag and the Smak say that this is an explanation of the pasuk of Ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha. So Hillel was telling us, the Ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha, this is the translation, explanation of Ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha. What you don't like to have done to yourself, don't do to others. Now, this brings up an obvious question, that why didn't Hillel explain the pasuk like in the regular way? Why did Hillel have to go explain the pasuk as the Ahavta Kamocha means don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself? Why didn't Hillel simply explain the pasuk the Ahavta Kamocha the way we all understand it? Love your fellow Jew as yourself. Why change the simple meaning of the pasuk? So the Ramban says, and the Malbim says the same thing, but the Malbim just elucidates more. He says like this, that he says two things. First of all, he says like this, that the Ramban says that the concept of loving someone else as yourself, mamish, is something that's impossible. The Malbim says the same thing. You can't actually love somebody like you love yourself. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never be mitzvah, would never command us to do any mitzvah in the Torah that's impossible to do. Love, ahava, and sinah, a person doesn't have a shlita over it. You can't actually really love a person like you love yourself. Therefore, Hillel understood that it's something that's not practical. And Hillel understood that the mitzvah has to be something which is a little bit different, not that you have to love your fellow Jew as yourself, but merely don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done for yourself. The Malbim and the Ramban say this is actually meduyik in the pasuk, and from two ways. The Mashal says something very similar. But the pasuk says the ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Generally speaking, when the Torah uses the word ahava, it uses a conjunction, uses s. V'ahavta. It should have said v'ahavta s reacha kamocha. Instead, it used the preposition v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. There's a big difference between the conjunction s and the preposition li. And here's what the difference is. When you say the word s, it means that two things are equal. that you love this like v'ahavta es Hashem elokecha. You should love Hashem like yourself. You should love your Hashem mamish. So the two things are actually equal. When it says live, it doesn't mean equal. It means to do something to reach a certain goal or to reach a certain, to do something practical. That's what it means. So v'ahavta es refers to the object. V'ahavta live refers to you personally doing something. So therefore, the something that you have to do, the practicality of it is what you don't want for yourself, do not do for others. Still, Hillel needs more explanation. Because why did Hillel say, what you don't like, don't do to your friend? Why did Hillel speak in a positive way? He spoke in a negative way. What you don't like, don't do to others. Why didn't Hillel say the other way around? What you do like, do to others. Instead of speaking in a negative way, why couldn't he speak in a positive way? So the emphasis that the Marsha explains, and others say the same thing, that Hillel understood that the pasuk goes back on the previous pasuk. The previous pasuk said, "Leisikim v'leisitar," do not take revenge and do not hold grudges. And therefore, Hillel understood that the pasuk was in the negative sense. Don't do an action negatively toward a person, and don't even speak or don't even hold in your heart something which is negative. That's what leisitar means. It's not even supposed to hold a grudge. And therefore, the hemshich of the pasuk, the continuation of the pasuk, also means don't do something in a negative sense as opposed to a positive sense. Now, the emphasis, according to the Pirush of the Mefarshim, the understanding of the pasuk of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha does not mean love. It means simply the way Hillel explained the pasuk, that there is no mitzvah in the Torah to love your fellow Jew like yourself. There is no such thing. But the explanation of the pasuk v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha means that you simply should not do to others what you don't do to yourself. And the truth of the matter is that it's really a befurish targum. Targum Yonasan ben Azil, and the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Chav Ches tells us that Yonasan ben Azil was a Talmud of Hillel. And Yonasan ben Azil, when he explains the pasuk, he says this. He says, pasuk before, he says, Lo seheven noknim v'lo natrin, don't take nakama, don't hold grudges. Devavu levnenacha. Then he says, to explain v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, he says, Usurachami l'chavrach, the min antisanilach lo savid le. And you should have mercy on your friend in the sense that what you don't like, the man atsanelach, what you do not like, lo savid le, ano Hashem, I am Hashem. So the Targum Yonasan ben Azil was a Talmud of Hillel, says befurish that he explains the pasuk to mean exactly what Hillel says, that v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is a mitzvah not to do to others what you don't want done to yourself. And the Sefer Yereim says this befurish, and Siman Reish Chav Daled in the mitzvah v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, he counts it as one of the Tag mitzvahs, and he says like this: Tziva Kadosh Baruch Hu Parshas Kedoshim v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha v'tanya. Rabbi Kiva Omer Zekla Adol b'Torah, and he says Pirush v'ahavta shelo lasas lo v'lomar lo lama lo davar hamas shelo libo. And then he explains a little bit further, and he says, that's what it says in the pasuk, that what you do not like, don't do to your friend. And the Torah Fasraim was a Pirush on the Sefer Yereim explains exactly like this, that the Sefer Yereim is saying that when he says, Lo lasos lo, don't do something to him. Lo lomer davar hamas libo, and don't say something which is given over to your heart, because you might say something and you might say to others that I really meant for good. In actuality, it wasn't for good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what the cheshbon is. But he means to say, the Sefer Yereim means to say this, that the explanation of the pasuk, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, means simply that a person should not do to others what he doesn't want done to himself. So Hillel is giving instructions. Hillel is telling you that how do you fulfill the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? Here's the instructions. Make sure that anything you do not like to have done to yourself, do not do to others. That's what the Mefarshim say. However, the Rambam is mashma differently. The Rambam, both in Sefer HaMitzvahs and in Yad HaChazakah, says this, and I'll quote you the Shloshim of the Rambam. The Rambam says in Sefer HaMitzvahs, Aseh Reish Vav, he says, who, this mitzvah after Rachel Kamocha, shetzivanu la'ov kitzaseinu was kitzaseinu. I mean, the different sections of Klal Yisrael, we need to love each other. Kamo shenehav like we love ourselves. V'shetehei chemlosi v'avasi la'achi, and my mercy and my love to my brother should be kechemlosi v'avasi la'atzmi, should be like my mercy and my love to myself. B'mamona, in my money, u'begufo, and in my body itself. So you see clearly that's at the end of the Rambam. The Rambam does not say that bring down in the Sefer HaMitzvahs the statement of Hillel at all. He doesn't mention Hillel whatsoever. He just learns the mitzvah of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamecha Kipshuto, that a person should love somebody else like he loves himself. He also, in his Sefer, in Hilchos Deis, Perek Vav Halacha Gimel, he says this also b'kitzur. He says, mitzvah kol adam, there's a commandment in each individual, la'avas kol echad v'echad miYisrael kigufo, to love every single person in Klal Yisrael like his guf. Shenemar, as it says, Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha. He doesn't bring Hillel at all. So it turns out that there's a Mechokas Rishonim in what the Hagdara of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha is. Mefarshim say that Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha is what you do not like, don't do to others. That would be the Ramban, the Sefer Reim, the Smag, the Sefer Chinuch, and it's much like that from Rashi as well. The Mashal says this, the Malbim says this, and so does the Ramban. And the Rambam says that Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha means you should love your friend like yourself, Mamish Ahava. But the problem is that Hillel does say what he says. How could the Rambam disagree with the Befurish Gemara? Hillel does say, Madalecha Sani, what you don't like, don't do to your chaver. So the emphasis is that the Gemara never mentions that Hillel is going on the pasuk of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha. The Gemara says simply, a ger came to Hillel and said to him a statement, and Hillel said, this is the whole Torah, and there's nothing, everything else is just simply pirush. The Mefarshim put this together with the statement of Rabbi Akiva, who was a Talmud of Hillel, and they said that that's what it's going in the pasuk of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha. But the Gemara doesn't say so. Hillel doesn't say that's going in the pasuk of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha. So the Rambam learns that Hillel was simply giving good advice to a ger, which is excellent advice. If a person wants to grow and to become a different individual and a better person, the first thing you've got to do is what you do not like, don't do to other people. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there is a mitzvah of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha, that you're supposed to love your fellow Jew like yourself. However, this brings up two questions. The first question, of course, is that in the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, who was a Talmud of Hillel, he learns the explanation of the pasuk like Hillel says. So you see that according to the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, the pasuk means Madalecha Sani l'sav l'chaverecha, what you don't like, don't do to your friend. That's a question I don't have an answer to. But the other question is that the Rambam is, so to speak, shooting for the stars. As the Ramban says, this is something which is impossible for an individual to do. You cannot Ibn Ezra says the same thing, you cannot love somebody else like you love yourself. How can the Rambam say this is part of the commandments? So the Ha'amik Davar, the Netziv, asks this question. Netziv actually on the pasuk of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha points out like this. He says a beautiful thing. The Rambam does not mean that a person has to love another individual mamish like himself. The Rambam doesn't mean to say that. The Rambam is merely flipping around Hillel's statement. Whereas Hillel spoke in the negative and said, what you don't like to do, have done to yourself, don't do to others. The Rambam is saying in a positive sense, meaning what you want to do, what you want other people to do for you, then you should do for other people as well. And that's really what the Rambam says in Hilchos Avelis, in Perek Yud, in the beginning of Hilchos Avelis, when the Rambam, beginning of Perek Yud, the Rambam talks about mitzvahs of Gemilas Chasadim. Rambam says that Timun Nachamavul is part of Gemilas Chasadim, of being kind to others, Hachnasas Kala, Levayas Hameis, and other things, Bikra Cholim. And the Rambam says this point. Rambam says it's all, even though all these mitzvahs are mitzvahs midivrayim, which means the Chachamim, Chazal enacted these mitzvahs that a person should visit the sick and escort the dead and to dance by somebody else's chasna. All these things are important, and the Chachamim enacted them, but they're all under the rubric of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha, because a person should do to others what he wants done to himself. The Rambam says this statement in the positive, and that's what the Rambam means to say, that the Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha means that a person should do for others what he wants done for himself. So it comes out that there's really no great machlekes between the Rambam and the Mefarshim. The Mefarshim learned that the mitzvah of Ahavta Ra'acha Kamocha is, like Hillel said, what you don't want done to yourself, don't do to others. And the Rambam flips it around on the positive side and says, what you do want done for yourself, that's something that you should do for others. So it comes out that a person, as all the Mefarshim say, the Rambam and everyone else, should have mercy and pity on other individuals, big gufam, in their bodies, right? Things that you want done for yourself, like Bikra Cholim and Levias and Mason and Hachnosas Kala. And also, you should also make sure, and also Bimamona, what you don't want to be done to your money, don't do to other people's money as well. And quite the opposite, you should do for other people and help them and aid them the way you want to be helped and you want to be aided for yourself. This is the mitzvah of Al Haftarach HaKamocha. I want to end with this point. We all know the halacha that it's also to say a hesped 30 days before a chag. And we're holding on 30 days before Pesach, so it's also to say a hesped, as it says before Rishon halacha. But I will say this. I was looking at a sefer and I saw the Agoyus Maimonides on the Rambam says this, that the mitzvah of a Haftarach HaKamocha is only by a person who's Re'acha, your chaver, the Torah of the mitzvahs. Aval Adam Rasha, a person who's wicked, she'eno mekabel techacha, that doesn't accept any rebuke, mitzvah l'sanosa. It's a mitzvah to him. The truth is before Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel, Gemara's Amud Beis, Gemara says that a person who is a Rasha, Rav says, mutter l'sanosa, you're allowed to hate him. But Nachman Yitzchak says, mitzvah l'sanosa. It's a mitzvah to hate such a person like that. And all the Paiskim, the Rambam Paskins, like from Nachman Yitzchak, that a person who does not accept Tochach and does not accept rebuke is a mitzvah to hate such an individual. We talked about this on Shabbos when I gave shir on this topic, what that means, a mitzvah to hate an individual, what the agdaras are, what the limitations are. And after davening the Beis Medrash meeting a few weeks ago, and we're not going to discuss it right now, but there is such a Gemara that says like that, and that is the halacha. But limitations and how it works, we can talk about that afterwards. I saw a sefer that has a kash on this Agoyus Maimonides. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Beis. The Gemara says that when a person is chayiv misa, he has to be executed by Bezdin. So the halacha is you're supposed to be borolo misa yafeh. You're supposed to give him a more lenient kind of a death, a quicker and easier type of a death. How do you know that? Because it says in the pasuk, "V'haftarach HaKamocha." Haftarach HaKamocha means borolo misa yafeh. You should execute him in the most lenient fashion possible. So the Sefer asks, according to Agoyus Maimonides, the pasuk "V'haftarach HaKamocha" does not go in a rasha. A person who's chayav misa is by definition a rasha. So how can we learn the pasuk "V'haftarach HaKamocha" does not go in a rasha when the Gemara says before the best? So I asked this kasha once to a chacham in Lakewood, and he said to me a point, which is a true point, but I don't agree with him that it's chat in the Gemara. He said like this, that because a person makes an avera one time doesn't make a person do a rasha. It's not b'chal a rasha. And he brought a raya from the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim says, if you see a person who's an average yid, he's not a tzaddik, he's not a rasha, he's just a yid, and he does an avera, it's asum midiraisa to tell over anybody else the avera that person did. This is because of lashon hara midiraisa. So just because a person did an avera one time doesn't make him a rasha. So the Gemara is talking about where a person did an avera one time and he's not a rasha, and therefore you have to be borer misi yafa. Now he's obviously not correct, because the Gemara does not make a distinction between a person that did an avera one time or he continuously did the same avera, in which case he's a rasha gomer. The Torah tells us that you're not mechuyev, that you're mechuyev to borolo misa yafa. But what is the answer? The answer to me is a double question. The answer is that the Gemara tells us that when a person is chayav misa, we go over to that person, we say to him, do tshuva, be mizvada. And if you are mizvada a person, you will have a kapara. And the Gemara does not give an option. If you look in the Gemara and you look in Shulchan Aruch, in Rambam Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't say anywhere that there's ever a scenario where a person says, no, I refuse to do tshuva. It doesn't exist in Klal Yisrael. Whenever a person is faced with the ultimate fate, a person always does tshuva. So I want to tell you like this. Two things I want to say. First of all, I knew Josh for well over 20 years. And a kind and good-hearted person. He spent many Shabbos with us. We used to have like this little indentation on our couch. We used to say, this is Josh's indentation. Slept over by us so many times. I knew him very well. A kind and sweet person he definitely was. He made a mistake. And there's no question in the moments that he made that mistake, no question in the world that he did tshuva. Absolutely no question. And therefore, we should have a list of Ganeden. I want to tell you one thing. I gave this year on V'ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha for a particular reason. And I want you to know Josh made one very big error. And this was the error. If he would have realized how much people loved him, how much people related to him, how tight they were with him, how much they would have done anything for him, his life would have been a little bit different. And there were people here, Zalman Schifrin, Leah Schifrin, and Kivi Bernhardt. These even were extremely giving and forthcoming to Josh, and they gave up their lives literally for months or even for years in order to help him. But we would have realized that the love that these people had was the same love that we had in our heart for him, then he would have had a different outcome. I want to conclude by saying that we have to learn this one great lesson from this whole story. And I've seen other people have approached me and mentioned this, that I see that there is a heightening of sensitivity to the needs of others in our community, and the community in Atlanta, and the community in Cleveland, and this should continue. If you see a person in distress, what do they say in the airports? If you see something, say something. If you see that a person has trouble, no matter what that trouble is, if it's trouble in a personal life or trouble financially, whatever the situation is, we have a chiyuv because of V'ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha to get involved. We are not permitted not to be involved. It's asur d'oraisa to see another yid struggling in any way whatsoever, and not to either help that person yourself or to go over to somebody who you know could help, a psychologist, a therapist, a person who is in finances can help with a business or something like that, and that is asur to do. So this is the great lesson that we have to take away from here, that V'ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha is a mitzvah that's incumbent on each and every one of us. And Be'ez Hashem, we will learn from this to become better individuals, to be more sensitive and be more careful to all of us around, and I mean myself, most importantly. I want to thank Josh and Dori Ehrenreich and Danny and Melanie Frank for sponsoring this. Shalom Nishmas and Lichtig Again.